viability, or actually sustainability in technology, where we're going to unlock a couple of ideas today about how we can use technology to help us accelerate our sustainability ambitions, understanding how these two areas, which are definitely provoking us to a lot of change, right? The digitalization and sustainability, it's definitely two drivers of corporate transformation. And today I have guests in our 2030 Reasons webinar series, Adam Karnama from Stockholm and Ricardo Vinuesa. We are a good combination of public consultancy, sorry, not public, but private and consultancy expertise with actually research and academic view. So I'm looking forward to actually hear the ideas that the two speakers are going to bring in today. And we would leave a little bit of space at the end of the presentation so that we can plug in a discussion and really tap into your questions and understand like what is it that we can do more? What is it that we took away from today, and how we can actually apply these ideas in what we do in our business lives, right, corporate lives, and really try to work together, right, in accelerating, as I was saying earlier, this transition. So we will be spreading this knowledge sharing on 45 minutes. We will try to start with Adam and then give it to Ricardo, and we'll spend 15 minutes at the end of the session to take the questions and to try to clarify some of the things that might be clarifying. I will be moderating this. I'm Mia Negru. I'm saying hello from Copenhagen, so suddenly we also have some sun, so that's a good sign for this specific webinar. I would also like the speakers to introduce themselves, to actually say the highlights of who they are, so because their words are probably better than mine. And with no further ado, I would give it to Adam. Thank you so much for taking this invitation and really joining us in spreading this knowledge.
Yes, thanks a lot, Mia. This is my pleasure to join this webinar and discuss about the important topics for our world. My name is Adam Karnama, and I've been working on the energy and sustainability during the last 12 years, and I have my PhD in sustainable energy system from MIT Portugal program, and working with a foundation called Aban Foundation to develop sustainability related solutions and services and transform large organizations to match with the expectation from the public and the sort of the way that we can survive in the future. Pleasure to join here.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for this invitation. My name is Ricardo Vinuesa. I'm an associate professor at KTH in Stockholm, and I work mostly with simulations, digitalization, machine learning to tackle outstanding problems in sustainability. And I work also with Adam in the Aban Foundation. So today we'll provide a bit of an overview on how these topics connect and how we can do from the research point of view.
Great. It sounds like really good topics. I have been actually trying to share a little bit the agenda, and I have some challenges. So Adam, can we please try again to see if we can share the presentation?
Yeah, I can do
okay,
that.
So good. Then we're on a safe side. So I would actually give it to you, Adam, so we can start tapping into this presentation. And as I said, I will then transition towards Ricardo, and we'll take questions afterwards.
Of course. Yes, I think that's great, and welcome to our presentation. And we are going to discuss about the corporate viability, and then the corporates as a sort of entity that defines the way that our societies are working. And then technology and sustainability are interconnected in the way that we can see how our societies can be viable, and corporates as part of those societies can be the entities to add value to our societies, not only to just consume resources from there. We had a short introduction of ourselves. I mean, I, together with Ricardo, we work also on a foundation that we address the same ideas that we are going to discuss in this presentation. And then what we are going to discuss today from sustainability perspective, what we are going to address is that there is a contradiction in a term that we widely use in corporate world called CSR, is corporate social responsibility. I'll discuss more about that. And then we do believe that sustainability should be part of growth strategy for a corporate. And what does that mean? We'll describe that in more details. But then the main question that we are going to answer in the first part that I will discuss is that how corporates can evolve. I mean, the element of evolve means that we understand the past, but then we see that this is a natural transition to evolve, to go to sort of incorporating sustainability as part of the growth strategy. In the second part of the presentation, Ricardo is going to dive deep into the angle of technology and specifically AI, and discuss about if AI can be an enabler or inhibitor for the sustainability implementation. And then the question that he will answer is that is there published evidence of the AI to act as enabler or inhibitor for the sustainable development goal targets that are set by United Nations for the sort of developments of our society. So we've covered these two parts of the presentation. So going to the sustainability part, I will start by showing you a small video that shows the main ideas that I'm going to describe, and then we'll jump to details and discuss it in a more comprehensive way. I hope everyone can see my screen. Yeah. Yes, by that 1 minute, I think that I start by saying that, I mean, corporates are the middle entity in our societies, that they define the cultures and the enabler of the change in our societies. And I think that is important to recognize that corporates has made our lives much easier without having that structures that we work collaborative together, and then also in a way that we add value in larger scale to each other. We wouldn't reach to this such level of developments and the comfort and a sort of a control over our lives and the life incidents that we have right now in our societies. I mean, what we can see right now is that, I mean, we have control over the natural disasters. We have made our lives much easier with the technology, and then that's, I mean, corporates are the enablers of that change, and they shape the culture and the way that our societies are functioning right now. But this doesn't mean that there are sort of some flaws and some shortcomings in the way that corporates has been performing their task of making our lives easier in this world. And but I think that we come from this thinking that we don't want to blame that, but then we want to see that how the evolution should happen, that we would have a corporates that are much more responsible, and they do the activities that are all aligned with the social values. I mean, we use the term corporate social responsibility, CSR, in long term in the corporate world, and then we had functions and people working on that. And then to make it short, basically it is charity, basically, if I want to make it easy and the sort of go to the contents of what does really mean. And the contradiction is here is that, does that mean that if we say that we do corporate social responsibility, does that mean that the corporate is doing the activities that are not socially aligned, and now they want to compensate that with a sort of more CSR type of activities? And if that is the case, why not all the activities should be aligned with the social value for our societies? And then there shouldn't be any contradiction in making good business and good business numbers, and then having, like, following the environmental, social, and economic aspects of the sustainability as well. So that's the main point and the contradiction that we see on the corporate social responsibility. It shouldn't be just a marketing message that you want to do something good, but what if everything in the corporate is aligned with some sort of social value? And then the most important thing, there is not any activity that is against the social value and the way that we function as a society in a right way. So, and then that's why we think that we believe that corporates, like humans, should evolve. And it doesn't mean that we need to always blame the ways that the corporates has functions in the past, and then tell them that they were responsible for everything that has happened, like the climate change that we see now, that it has come to a level that it is getting to be uncontrollable, and then we need to do urgent actions against that. So we need to see that as a path of evolution, and all of us, we learn, and then we don't want to forget that the corporates has done very good things in our societies as well, but how does it work in order to evolve that and then make that even more connected to the way that they create social value? So we introduce organic growth theory, and then we say that corporates, like humans, they need to evolve. And there are two main components for that evolution. I mean, we you know all about the Maslow pyramid, that human beings are start to have basic needs, and then gradually evolve to be self-actualized, and then to have a confidence that they do everything, and then they do everything that is um, it is highly valued. And then also we see the ecological thinking, and also we see a way of evolution within that ecological thinking as well, that you start from being egocentric, you care about yourself because you need to be on that phase in order to survive, and then to be an entity. But then eventually you start to be more ethnocentric. This means that you care about more of your surrounding, and then eventually you will be world centric, that you will care everything around you in the sort of in the world as well. So based on those two concepts, I mean, we introduce the organic growth theory. And if you think that corporates are so much like a human being as well, I mean, in the first need, the humans, they need oxygen, foods, water, or sleep, or everything of the basics needs. But then a corporate needs, I mean, you need one employee or sort of a funder or a business or service, and something really fundamental like a pen or a phone or a computer in order to make a corporate. But then when the corporate evolves and then you meet that sort of needs, you still to go to these safety needs, and then you would need protection and security, and then you start to see the corporates also to need multiple employees, and then they need a sort of a stream of revenue, and then maybe they need an office space, and then they gradually their needs are evolving as well. And then we see that the third level, the belongingness starts to evolve, and then the employee relationship, the investors and the clients are coming in, and then this team need, when the brand needs to be recognized, there are some a partnership, maybe it goes to a IPO, and then the coverage of that. But then on the highest level, we see the corporate citizenship and the corporate social responsibility to be an important element when we see a corporate to be self-actualized. And then in that evolution, we believe that this evolution should happen in three steps. I mean, you would start a corporate to be egocentric. You need to have that egocentric way of thinking in order to make an entity like a corporate to happen. And then there should be a sort of passing through the sort of 7 steps of the hierarchy of needs, the Maslow pyramid, and then eventually you start to redefine your values on how you would go to the next phase, that you not only think about your ego and then your corporate, but then you start to have think about your surrounding, and then to be ethnocentric. And then there would be a sort of ethnocentricity around that, and then you again pass the different levels, considering that you are an ethnocentric, and then you would be redefining your values to be world-centric eventually, and then passing that you will come to sort of to be a fund corp, and that's a foundation corporation, that everything within that sort of perspective is highly socially aligned, and then is creating value for our society, and then also you make business returns, and we believe that there should not be any contradiction between these two. I mean, we discussed about the Aban Foundation. We want to make that impact, and then we believe that diversity and sustainability are important part of that. And then within that sort of scopes of different levels, we develop models that you can evaluate the corporates and guide it on how you still keep a way that you keep your revenue at the same level or even higher, but then also you would consider that you would understand and then implement sustainability measures within the organization. Part of my conversation with the large corporates is always like that if there is a sort of expert to come and implement sustainability, this can create even additional value for the corporates, not only to be a cost or a risk mitigation plan. And we need to take it right, and that's the responsibility of the experts and the leaders in the sustainability to get it right. One example is that for the energy procurement, for example, there are ways to buy electricity green and cheaper, and maybe there are not so many people that they would expect that, but they think that there are always premiums that you need to pay to buy green electricity. But for example, you can buy your electricity from PPAs, like power purchase agreements, and then you would make a lot of saving, but still you buy your electricity in a low risk manner with a lower cost. And this is really possible, but then you need to have an expert to shape that. And then there are activists that they push for the really ambitious targets, and we need that sort of movement, but we need experts that they shape a real solution based on business numbers, and then make that incorporated as a growth strategy for the corporates. I mean, about the Aban Foundation, we make that, and then we want to make the impactful, innovative ideas to growth, and then we closely connected to the societal developments of the world. And that's why we're trying to build one school per country in the world, and then also developing the businesses that are all related to sustainability. And then those businesses, we are not talking about like charity or a sort of CSR. There are real businesses that they need to create numbers, and they're sort of even better numbers than the non-sustainable alternatives, and then show that as an example that investing on the impact initiatives, they would give even better return on the investments, and there are high social values from them as well. And those two, like business value and the social value, they should not come in contradiction. There are some businesses that you can read more around on our website, and like from solar energy, some consulting, and the retail and the food industry, that you can read more about those businesses in our website, www.aban.foundation. Yes, that's and you're always welcome to join us with that. With that,
very, very interesting ideas, and yeah, they also raise a lot of questions actually from my side. Definitely a philosophy that we're also believing in.
yes.
Yeah, it is actually a shift, right? It is a shift in everything that happens, and this is just putting another framework, to this shift that we need to follow. Thank you, Adam, and let's make some space now for Ricardo to come and tell us about the AI, and like what kind of data do we get from this shift? Is it actually happening or not? Is technology helping or not? And then we'll get to the questions. I'm really curious, to hear some perspectives from the two of you. Ricardo?
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you go to the next slide, Ahmad?
Yes.
Yeah, so as most of you know, you're aware of the 2030 agenda of the United Nations, the Sustainable Development Goals. I think you can you can continue so that we can see everything in the slide, which is essentially a blueprint for a sustainable future, which is not binding when it comes to or legally binding when it comes to the member states, but they are very important guidelines to try to have a growth that is sustainable worldwide. This agenda contains a total of 17 sustainable development goals. These are the big goals, and a total of 169 targets, which are smaller goals within those larger objectives that are being marked. So if we go to the next slide, we can see a little bit the motivation for our study. What we wanted to do was to assess whether there is published evidence on the impact of artificial intelligence on each of these targets, each of these 169 targets. And to be able to answer this question, we had to assemble a multidisciplinary team, because, of course, as many of you know, the SDGs go from no poverty to climate to energy. It's a very broad range of topics, and therefore assessing this question is not something that can be done from a unique perspective, but one needs to have a quite broad approach in order to properly tackle these questions. So if we go to the next slide, we can see the classification that we had. We had a total of 10 experts worldwide, including experts in machine learning, experts in sustainability, in climate, and also in economy and aspects like ethics as well. And what we did with this expert team was to divide the 17 SDGs into 3 different categories. No? So we divided them into the SDGs related to the society, the ones that have to do with the economy, and with the environment. This is a reasonably standard classification, but this allows us to really look at this in a holistic way, so at these effects in a holistic way, so we can try to understand how these impacts of technology, of digitalization, of AI can really affect these 3 big spheres in our lives, basically. So if we continue to the next slide, we can explain a bit the process. This study was published in Nature Communications. I'll give you the reference at the end so you can check it. And we have a very complete supplementary material. So we have a list, as you can see in this slide, in which we show for each of the 169 targets evidence for either AI acting as an enabler or an inhibitor. That's what you can see in these first columns. We also have the reasoning, so a paragraph in each of these targets for the justification, and many references. We have 3, 4, 5 references for target really justifying all these connections between AI and sustainability. And then what we had was a set of experts. In this case, the two people at the top, those are Sami and Simon. They've made a first assessment, and several reviewers. So at the bottom, that was Yolanda and myself, so that we could do what is called an expert elicitation process. So there is a discussion, and there is a quite intense rounds of comments and reviews, so that we can all converge towards our unified view on the effect of AI on each of these targets. So you can see the supplementary material in this article. I mean, this is something that you can go and check. This very long list is all open access, and you can actually see as well the argumentations that we have. So if we go to the results that we have in the next slide, overall what we see is that 79% of the targets can be positively affected by AI, whereas 35% can be inhibited by the development of AI. This means that this technology is clearly showing a positive potential. We can really harness a lot of possibilities and opportunities from this technology, but we should not be forgetting the negative impacts. Even if we have more positive than negative, only one target being very negatively affected could really destroy all our progress. So we have to be aware of the negatives, and we have to develop adequate frameworks for regulation and technological development. So as you can see there, we can see that the highest potential is actually in the environment, and perhaps the area with more negative consequences is that of the society, which is not surprising if we keep in mind all the aspects with social media and data that are surrounding us. In the next slide, we can actually see a more detailed view. So we can actually see on the left all the positive effects, and on the right all the negative effects. And we can go for all the SDGs, we can actually see the percentage of targets that are positively or negatively affected by AI. So you can see for each of the SDGs all the results. The key, we have two lines here. The lighter color is associated with the results when we only take into account if there is a reference showing positive or negative evidence. And the darker color shows the strength of the evidence. So we can actually, from this figure, we can actually understand that in the context of the environment and the society, there are quite some gaps in the negative effects. So the negative effects of AI on the environment and the society are not so well documented. That's a research gap. And if we compare the positives, there is a big reduction when we look at the dark color and the light one in the economy. So the positive effects of AI on the economy are the ones that are maybe not so well documented, and it's a research gap for which one should have a bit of a more robust approach. Okay. You can actually see the reference now at the bottom of the slide. So that's Vinuesa and others in Nature Communications 2020. So you can, if you go there, you can see all the examples and all the supplementary material. But in this presentation, I will highlight some of the main results so you can get a main picture of what we discovered in this study. So if we go to the next slide, what we do is that we can see some of these examples. No? For instance, clearly AI is helping through enabling new technologies that were not available before, and new capabilities that were not possible. This is one clear example is in the context of SDG 1 on no poverty, where AI is enabling to analyze satellite data through convolutional neural networks and other image processing approaches to track poverty, which clearly it can help us to develop better strategies if we can use the satellite data to see the regions that are in danger of developing poverty, so we can have the right actions to tackle them. Generally, AI is also having negative effects in several areas, but perhaps one of the most important ones is that it's going to increase inequalities if we don't do something about it. If not everyone has the same access to these resources, and the future will heavily rely on artificial intelligence, then SDG 10 on reducing inequalities is going to be significantly affected, and is going to this whole process is going to exacerbate the already high inequalities existing worldwide. So it's very important to make sure that we understand the effects of this technology on our futures, our future economies, and how we can ensure that all the actors and all the different societies can really have access to this technology. Okay, so we can look at some examples. It's important to highlight that AI has very positive effects on SDG 7 on clean and affordable energy. That's one of the areas that are very important in the Aban Foundation. Very little negative effects, and also on the environment, which is another of the key areas as well of this foundation. So we can really exploit a lot of the positive potential of artificial intelligence in these two key areas. And if we think of energy, I mean, of course, AI can really help to regulate the markets, can really help to understand how the supply and demand of energetic sources can interact. But AI itself can have a negative effect on both energy and the environment, and that's because of the cost associated with its usage. So nowadays, ICT, information and communication technologies, where we include the data centers that are used to train these AI models, are responsible for 1% of the total electricity worldwide. But it's expected that by 2030, if we don't do something about it, ICT will be 20% of the total electricity consumption. So that's huge. There is really, really a big cost associated with developing these models, and there are techniques by which we can make sure that we are training these models efficiently. So we can actually use transfer learning. We can use techniques of imposing in our deep learning models the information that we have about the physical phenomenon that we want to model. So there are ways to train more efficiently and more sustainably these AI models, and we need to make sure that we are not trying to solve one problem but then create another one through the usage of AI. Okay. So if we go to the next slide, we can look at other risks. For instance, clearly the current political polarization that we live in our societies. We have also experienced with COVID-19, with the situation in Ukraine, all the misinformation, all social media, all the data, and the algorithms that are feeding us basically what we want to hear and see are really exacerbated, the existing problems that are exacerbated by technology and by AI. So we have to be aware of this. And of course, in the context of SDG 16 for strong institutions, we have to be aware of the fact that a regulatory framework is needed, but before having regulatory oversight, we should have regulatory insight. What we mean is that in order to develop proper regulations and proper frameworks to control this technology, we need to have experts who know what AI can and cannot do being part of this process. Otherwise, the regulations and the whole frameworks that we're going to establish are going to be counterproductive. So we need to be aware of the importance of having experts and not just politicians tackling these very important issues. Okay. So another example that is quite remarkable is the aspect of digital contact tracing for COVID-19. What we did in another study in results in engineering was to develop a framework looking at the requirements of these contact tracing apps that were proposed as a solution for COVID-19 on the impact of the citizens, the employed technology, and the governance. And what we found is that clearly it's essential to establish decentralized data gathering and an adequate governance and adequate deployment of these apps and efficient communication strategies in order to ensure their penetration, which unfortunately was not the case, largely due to these very badly planned communication strategies of the governments. So in the next slide, we have a summary of all the various aspects we have basically the interaction between technology and the individuals. The thickness of the arrows indicates the speed of change. So technology is changing very fast, imposing new needs on the individuals. The individuals are lagging a bit behind the technology, but both of them are much faster than the governments. The government are really very, very slow when coming up with legislation, and also when coming up with appropriate testing and protocols for really having an adequate establishment of this technology. And all of this happens with the environment as an underlying layer, where we are trying to obtain resources, but to not have a too negative impact on it. So this interaction summarizes how really it's quite unbalanced, the development very heavily focused on the technology, and how the individuals and the governments should take action in really leading this dynamics that we can see here. So if we continue, there is I will be a bit short in this last part, but there is quite some potential on SDG 11 on sustainable cities. Pollution kills 800,000 people every year in Europe, just pollution in cities, and there is a huge potential of AI to develop more sustainable and cleaner urban environments. So in the next slide, we can actually test the conclusions. Just to summarize, that we can use AI for predicting pollution levels, for non-intrusive sensing, for using sparse measurements of pollution, and have a better picture of what pollution patterns look like in cities in order to have a good strategy to have more much cleaner cities. And just to these are my conclusions. It's a summary of my section, just to basically reiterate that AI is having a huge impact on everybody's lives, and that we have the potential to harness really, really good opportunities for our futures, but also there are very high risks associated with this technology that we really need to be aware of. Thank you very much, and we are happy to take your questions.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so I actually saw on the negative impact just on your last slide, the nudging, like, can you elaborate a lot that? The last slide, when you're talking about AI is already affecting everyone's lives negatively by big nudging and citizen scores.
Yeah, the nudging, that's essentially how AI is pushing certain ideas in the societies. Is connected to what we mentioned before of biased election outcomes, for example, or certain agendas that are convenient to certain groups. We know that social media, right, is as a network of contacts, and it is possible, depending on how you use the algorithms, to convince you that the majority is thinking something when that's actually the minority, depending on how those nodes are actually being connected, and how the information that is presented to you is actually filtered by these AI algorithms. So that's a little bit the big risk of the big nudging. You may be able to push certain agendas, and this has a power that is, I would say, it's hard to predict the big power that this technology can really have in this direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we are actually working on that, right? Really trying to kind of, in a way, incorporate what Adam talked a little bit earlier about this shift, in corporate culture. But we're trying to do that by enabling the workforce, right? Trying to get the workforce through, of course, nudging, to start doing more more sustainable actions, thinking more sustainably. But where we feel like we are not like that imposing, compared to other kind of AI enabled nudging solutions, is that we're really trying to actually tap on the motivation of the people, of the employee, and put them on the track to contribute to sustainability from their own personal values, right? So really not imposing on them, you have to do this because this is what I want as a corporate, or as the need in society, but actually saying you can do something that you feel inspired to do, while connecting it, with the bigger goal and the higher purpose of it, right? So very, very interesting, and it's actually another point where I would like to start asking is connecting to this sustainability, like growth strategy, to incorporate sustainability in the growth strategy. I would like to actually hear from you an answer on this. First of all, like Ricardo, connected to the technology. So what is your recommendation, right? So when we talk about corporates that need to incorporate sustainability as part of growth strategy from a technological perspective, what could corporates do? And then from you, then Adam, looking at the same exact question, how could corporates incorporate sustainability as part of the growth strategy? Connected to your model, what should they do? So I repeat my question again: what should corporates do? What are the first steps? What are the steps from your perspective to actually incorporate sustainability in the growth strategy from, let's say, technology perspective for Ricardo, and from cultural shift, the Maslow needs pyramid for you, Adam?
You want to go first, Ahmad?
Yes. I think that the first, I mean, the question of what they should do, I think that we need first a big mindset shift on the executive levels in the corporates to see sustainability as a just risk mitigation or extra costs for the corporates. I think we were in that time in the past, maybe 10 years ago, or even longer in the past, that was the case, that sustainability was a sort of a risk mitigation or extra cost to do something good. But nowadays, this is not the case at all. I mean, we see this sort of the business cases that are much more clear, making better returns than non-sustainable alternatives. And I gave you the examples of the electricity procurement, but then there are many other examples that you can see that, I mean, there might be a lack of knowledge, and then that mind shift change that is needed to happen in the sort of executive levels in the big corporates, and I mean even SMEs to develop that. And then that's maybe sometimes I feel like that the changes in the technology and the sort of the sustainability movement has been so fast that the executives, they stay on the sort of the mindset of the maybe few years in the back. And then, I mean, technology here is the main enabler. I mean, we need to go to the different ways of the sort of the processes, internal processes, and the way that the corporates serve their end customers, and then bring that angle of sustainability to make new business cases, and then implement that with the sort of the right technology to happen. And then AI is one technology, but then there are wider perspective of the blockchain technology, machine learning, or deep learning, and those are the main enabler of that. And then I fully respect the sort of the activist movement in the sustainability, and then we need to have that. But then we have the business mindset people, like on the executive, that their important thing in their mind is the business numbers, because they are the way that they are evaluated based on those numbers. And then we need to bring those two words, I mean, near to each other in the way, and they are not really segregated, or they are not really independent. They are near, but then you need experts that bring that sort of two words very near to each other, and then create a sort of a business case that both they see the value, both the business and the sustainability. And the main enabler here is definitely the technology. And technology is so advanced right now that we can see many of those already being implemented with a sort of a cost-effective way. But we need that sort of expertise to shape it in the right way, and bring it and push it forward within the organization. And that's why we call this viability, the corporate viability, those two elements. I mean, if we are not going to take that route, I believe that the viability of the corporates can be under a big question. Because if we see a corporate that just behave in the way that the sort of the negative effects are just more than the sort of the positive social contribution, there is a question about viability of that entity to be part of our societies. And we need to avoid that. We need to see that the corporates, they just gradually evolve and then incorporate more and more of those measures within their cultures, within their sort of the ways that they are running their businesses, and the way the executives thinks about those measures as well, in order to to still make them a valid entity within our societies. Otherwise, I do believe that their viability in that ecosystem of the societies that we are shaping the future with, it can be under a big question.
Yeah, it's definitely the idea of like what is the cost of the shift of the change, right? And what is the cost of the disruption? I think this is what a lot of the companies are looking into. Should we spend money to become more sustainable, really adopt things in the business model, in the processes that they're doing, or should we just continue what we're doing and just do a little bit of like branding and promotional on like very small initiatives, or as you said, just charity, right? So maybe that is going to cover our let's say sustainability cost, but keep doing what we're doing, right? So it's I think it will be like either disruption or change, right? That companies actually to choose from and just bet on one of these horses. Ricardo, tell us, what should companies do? What should corporates do?
From a technological point of view, and I'm looking more at how AI can actually help in this context, I would say that we should keep in mind the big cost of developing these models. I mean, the electricity cost, as I mentioned before, and to change the shift of not using bigger models and more data and trying to go bigger and bigger, but more to try to use the knowledge that we have about training deep learning models, about using data in a much smarter way. If we know something about the process that we want to model, we should embed that information in the deep learning model. We should not let the network learn something that we know about the system by itself. What we should do is embed that knowledge in the deep learning model, and also use tools like transfer learning, use tools like general agents that are able to perform different tasks, so we don't have to be retraining all over and over and wasting huge resources, and perhaps having a change of mindset of understanding what is the environmental and economical cost of using these high performance computing facilities. I mean, that's perhaps the important aspect. If you're using a deep learning model or a simulation model to try to predict some emissions, and that model costs economically and environmentally more than the emissions that you're trying to avoid, then perhaps it's not a good way to go. So we really need to be aware of the cost of this technology and the environmental impact of this technology.
Thank you. I know we've passed time, but we have a question from in the chat. Someone asking, Gabriela, do you have any projects or pilots in place to increase the transparency towards real sustainability actions and avoid greenwashing? Do you guys know of anything like it? It's probably more for you, Ricardo, but maybe Adam, you also know anything of this. What is your knowledge?
Yeah, within the foundation, we do have an initiative called, I can write the name in the chat. We call it spiritu.com. And then we are addressing the greenwashing in the electricity sector and then the energy consumption. So we are developing a blockchain and the AI solution that we try to match hourly basis the consumption of the electricity with the generation, and we make sure that if you claim that you're using green electricity, it is green, and if it is not, what is that source of electricity? Is it nuclear? Is it coal or any other types of electricity? So that's one of them. I mean, we have more initiative within the foundation, but I think that connecting to greenwashing and those things, I think we are developing one of the most advanced solutions around that in the industry, and then addressing greenwashing in our industries in a proper manner with the right technology and business models that serve our society. Yeah.
Perhaps
Ricardo.
Perhaps a quick comment on transparency. There are many initiatives now on how to make algorithms used for sustainability transparent. We know that deep learning models are black boxes, so we don't really know exactly how the decisions are being made, but there is quite some interpretability frameworks such that we can really see how the decision process is being carried out in these AI models, and how we can really increase the transparency of all these processes. So I think that's also another essential aspect of sustainable business models if one is really going to use AI, you need to have interpretable approaches in the process, of course.
Yeah, very valid. Just one more comment before we close this recording. We will send the recording to everybody that actually registered, and we'll also post it in Scandinavian Sustainability Group, where I'm also going to add on the speakers today, so that people that are interested in more of what they have to say, they can definitely reach out to them and get a hold and look back to what we've presented today. With that being said, I would like to thank very much to the participants, to the speakers, bringing a lot of knowledge from Sweden, Stockholm. Like we know, Scandinavia, it's quite a forefront, and we actually had a lot of people that registered for this webinar from other corners of the world. So thank you very much again for joining and for also tapping in for the ones that did, even if today it's actually a holiday day. So thank you very much, and I'll see you at the next